We've come now to the end of our journey together as we've been looking at the story of Bergen-Belsen. I'm standing here in Bad Fallingbostel, which until 2015 was a British Army base, and where some of your forebears and maybe even some of you watching this were stationed. I was personally chaplain to RTR here in Bad Fallingbostel between 2000 and 2003. Well, behind me, or around us here, is a railhead. This is what remains left of the military railhead, but railheads like this at Bergen, 7 kilometers away from Bergen-Belsen, the endless stream of transports of prisoners flooded into Bergen-Belsen, and they then had to walk the 7 kilometers under armed guard, many of them dying on the way. It's a tragic fact, but 20% of those who arrived by train to Bergen-Belsen were either dead on arrival or mortally sick and died soon after. From the early part of 1944, so March 1944, Bergen-Belsen was re-designated as a recuperation camp. And effectively what happened was that people were brought here who were too sick to work, effectively as a dumping ground. The first transport to arrive were 1,000 TB sufferers from the underground V2 rocket and munitions concentration camp on the Eastern Harz at Dora Mittelbau, and only 57 out of that 1,000 transport survived. Bergen-Belsen then later on into 1944, just before liberation, became a dumping ground for all sorts of concentration camps: Buchenwald, Theresienstadt, Auschwitz. All these sick people were brought and evacuated as the Soviet army swept from the east and the Allies swept from the west. These concentration camps were emptied and they were all brought to Bergen-Belsen, which meant that there was a massive overcrowding problem. The population of Bergen-Belsen doubled, even trebled. And so that's why there was such a catastrophe with the sickness, and so many people died. Well, it's important to understand that for Germany, this was just a dark period in its history. Leading up to that point, well, certainly before the First World War, Germany were our allies. But for that period, during the National Socialist period, it was a very dark period indeed. But now Germany is in the forefront of welcoming refugees. And behind us here is what was St. Barbara's Barracks, and beyond that, Lumsden Barracks, and Lumsden Barracks, where 2RTR were, and Scots DGs were, is now a refugee camp, and currently housing people from Somalia, having flown the fighting in Somalia, are now welcomed by Germany. And the German government now teach that the Allies liberated the German people from National Socialism. Well, I hope that you've learned something from today, and your last question now is to think of those lessons that you've learned and how perhaps you can implement them into your own life as soldiers. So thank you for journeying with me, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Goodbye.